Andrew, thanks very much for being with us to discuss the Australian report, which is now out. Now, let's look at some of the detail. I guess if you were looking at this from a position of just pure conversions, you see 3 people being converted in the first year. And when we're looking at a method that seems to be wholly about converting new people and bringing new people in, does 3 people seem depressing to you?
No, I was actually really encouraged. So the first year we got 3 people converted, second year 3, third year 5. Now I think a church of 40 people in the first year, 40 people, 3 converts, 50 people second year, 3 converts, 75. I think a church like that in our country, seeing a convert for every 12 people in the congregation, is like, I'm actually encouraged. It is hard, slow work to bring about conversion in our context, and when you compare that particularly to the established church world, where if a church of 200, 300, by comparison, we ought to be seeing in those congregations 20 people converted a year. So we're seeing a church of 40 people seeing 3 converts. You would expect, therefore, to be seeing established churches, if they're of the same impact, 20, 30 converts a year. And, I'd love to see that happening across the country. But typically what's happening in our established churches is 1 convert, 2 converts, maybe a year.
Sometimes the same or even lower.
So sometimes less per year, sometimes none. And so, if you compare the stats to a different country, then you've got to ask big questions. Why is Australia only seeing 3 converts in the first year? America's seeing 11 converts in the first year, then 15, 18. What's happening in our country, in our context? That's a good question to ask. There are things we can learn from others. They're good questions to ask. But my experience, having done evangelism in this context for 35 years now, is that it's just very slow, hard work to get someone from pagan to think about the Christian faith, to actually want to come and explore some more and make a decision to follow Jesus. That is a massive process. For us, it takes months, years to get established, but months once they're established in relationships with us.
You make the point about comparison in terms of culture. I guess you're saying that there's less distance to move people in some cultures. Like the American culture, one would argue, is more ostensibly Christian than the Australian culture. So the distance to move somebody is less.
Look, there's all those issues to wrestle with. Why is it? Is it because the church planters there are so far better, so more capable and competent? That's the question really to face. So there are things that we're not doing we could be doing, absolutely. But my sense is, and this is not just, others also reflect on this, you're dealing with a culture in the American scene where, the American presidents are having to kind of speak of blessing, God blessing you and so on, and they're having to make a case. In our country, no one talks like that at all. And in the American context, your unchurched, non-Christian person, their aunt is probably married to a pastor somewhere. So the networks and steps for removal from the Christian experience is far, far less than it is here. Whereas the people we're dealing with, I'll give you an illustration. When we started the church here at EV, my wife and I, we worked on our relationship. We came in, we were a parachute plant, so we didn't have a mobilised core group with us, but we worked relationships. So we did the school scene, parents of our kids, friends, and so on. I joined sports clubs and have worked for 20 years in sports clubs relating to people. My wife managed to get 6 women to do Christianity Explored with her over 10 years, 15 years. Not one followed through on it. Now, is she a very poor evangelist? Is there other things she could have been doing? We keep asking those questions and wrestling with that. But I've worked in sports clubs for decades. I've managed to get 3 couples to church over 20 years of personal close work, and managed to get one couple to go through our life evangelism program. Not one of them are in church today.
So this experience of, say, 3 in the first year, 3 in the second year, 5, this is actually quite
wonderful.
Personal.
I'm excited by it.
If you'd say, now EV's undoubtedly been blessed by God, has grown great guns. But But you'd be saying even EV didn't reflect statistics like this in the early days.
Well, no, I think it did, but not through my personal. My point is that in my personal experience, it is very slow, hard work. It's evangelism in Australia. It is like looking for opals, and it's the, I don't know if you know the Lightning Ridge scene. So you go there. How do you opal mine? Well, you're looking for a small seam of opals in this vast landscape. What do? Well, one way to do it is to dig a 2-metre trench, a hole straight down, and start digging around. Men spend their life in that one hole looking for a seam. Now, if you strike a seam, then you just get great response. Now, I think the 30 to 40 we start with, they're each in their hole. And, you know, I worked my hole for 20 years and have not seen one convert, personally. Kathy's worked, you know, and so and so. But, you know, one or two in that 40 found a seam and saw some converts, and we worked through that process. The point I would make is that because we're dealing with a context where people aren't warmly disposed to the Christian faith, you can spend a lot of time with your set of relationships and not get anywhere. So we've got to think about church planting I think now I want to roll on to how does that impact what we do. We've got to pursue models of planting and evangelism that aren't simply deeply invested long-term relationships with a few. We've got to find ways to get the 30 or 40, 50, 70 as it grows, which is what we've sought to do, to broadcast more widely so you find seams that aren't in your friendship circles, beyond you, so that you can actually then, that's what we've done. We find the warm, live fruit that's not part of our friendship network. So I think that's one of the outcomes of all this, is to keep thinking more broad. We can't just do friendship networks.
Yeah, right. Is that what you're saying to church planters who you're coaching? I guess on the one side you're saying you're encouraging because small numbers don't necessarily mean a failure. But is that what you're saying to them, to look for those different sorts of evangelism models?
Yeah, absolutely. I want us to use any and every model of evangelism we can, absolutely. But we ought not choose models that are designed to be intensive, long-term, down one hole. In the Australian scene, you just don't get much fruit that way. You might strike a seam. Far better to try and work out ways of getting our 30 to 40 than 70, have a larger profile, broadcast more broadly so that they find those connections and then work them. And so it's, I think, trying to get our church planters to be thinking about punching above their weight in terms of profile, in terms of ministry pursuit and so on, yeah.
Well, Andrew, this is the first of several conversations we're going to have on these stats, so look forward to hearing what you have to say about some of the others.